documentation of processes right from the start. I think that's so critical and key to have consistency because as a startup, you're going to conduct, you would hope a sufficient amount of planning, but as you're doing that, you also need to be documenting your processes so that hopefully you'll come to a point where you won't have time to do that.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of the Inventive Journey. I am your host, Devin Miller, the perpetual entrepreneur, as well as the founder of Miller IP Law, where we help startups and small businesses with patents and trademarks. Today, as everybody knows, on the Inventive Journey, we go through the different journeys that startups and co-founders and those that are in the trenches, their journey of how they got to where they're at and what they're doing. And we have a great guest today. Jo Lynn, and she'll talk a little or much better about her journey than I will. But to give you a little bit of background, she has a mother that was a dentist and a father that was a photographer, and also taught her golf. And they always had great aspirations for her, and she didn't fail to achieve, but did it in her own way. She's moved around a bit and done some things with her father's career, or her husband's career, not her father's career. And now she's into some developing her own product, her own startup with I've Been Vetted. So there's a quick overview, but welcome to the podcast, Jo Lynn.
Thank you for the invitation, Devin. A pleasure to be here.
All right. Well, why don't we jump in? So I gave a brief introduction, but you'll do a much better introduction of yourself. So maybe tell us a little bit about your journey and where you've been and where you're at now.
Well, you did a great foundation. You laid the foundation with my parents, of course, back in a place we both know, which is Shaker Heights, Ohio. Both of my
right. And I didn't mention, yeah, you were in Shaker Heights, which is in part of Cleveland, Ohio, and that's where I went to Case Western Reserve to get both my law and MBA degrees. So we certainly have that in common, and always fun to make those connections. So didn't mean to jump into your introduction. So go ahead.
No problem. Yes, both of my parents. Actually, I'm the middle child between two brothers, and we were all taught to work in their businesses starting early, and they pretty much prepared us for the business world, and they also gave us the belief that, the boundaries that you have as a person are those that you create for yourself, right? Mm-hmm. And through challenges, there's growth, and you take measurable risk, and you make certain that you give back. So those are a lot of the founding principles that I learned early on. In the very beginning, my father actually wanted me to become a golfer, and I ended up becoming the first female on the men's golf team in my high school. My mother wanted me to become a dentist, and I enjoyed both to some extent. I was the office manager for her dental practice as well, but my interest fell more so towards journalism and the business side of things. So after graduating, I became the editorial assistant for the Journal of Applied Social Sciences at Case Western Reserve, and ran into someone who was actually one of my mother's patients at her dental office, who was an agent at State Farm Insurance. So that's how I learned more about the operations side of the insurance world, and entered into that gladly, and learned a lot. Learned that there's so many areas within the field, and that the industry as a whole serves as a barometer of things that are emerging in the future, the risk exposed by society. And I fell into the litigation side of things. So I started out with State Farm, and I also, after that, I ended up going to work as a special examiner at the Department of Insurance in Arizona and served as a witness for the Attorney General's office with regards to unfair claims and trade practices. So that kind of developed that understanding surrounding compliance. And after that, I went on to manage litigation at different insurance companies and learned a lot about the concepts surrounding liability and risk, and noticed in the process some emerging risks that were developing.
I'm going to jump in just so you were at some different insurance companies. You jumped around a bit, so I guess backing up, Case Western Reserve, got your English and business to major and minor, and then you went on to work for different insurance companies, moved around a bit. I think when we talked a little bit, you kind of went to different insurance companies and saw different industries as your husband moved with his career, and so you got exposure to that. But then how did you jump in? So I mean, I know there's a whole bunch of different areas of insurance, but how did you jump into more of the litigation side versus, what would have been more general or issuing insurance or working with insurance? What gravitated you towards the litigation side?
Mainly, I think that, with my husband being on the litigation side also, and leaning more towards that side, right? Even in the beginning, in the different departments, you have a claim that comes in and it's pre-litigation, typically, but then it actually could have the potential of evolving into a lawsuit. And I really enjoyed that area because to a large extent, you're really impacting the future. Some of those cases that you manage become precedents for future incidents. And in my thought process, I felt that, this is extremely impactful.
Okay. So then you decide to jump into litigation. Was it everything you thought, or being kind of litigation rep that, hey, now we can go and find all the bad guys or help all the good guys, or, kind of how was that with being a litigation rep or, making that change and adjustment? I think that kind of plays a bit into what you're doing today. So that's why I find it interesting to dive in is kind of, when you get into the litigation side of insurance, is it interesting and enthralling or boring or fun or defend the good guy or help the bad guy, or how does that all work?
Well, I definitely enjoyed it, and I certainly think that the industry has in the past gotten a bad rep, that most of the people I work with are trying to compensate people to put them to a pre-incident or pre-accident position. And I really enjoyed it. Through litigation, there's so many areas. On the attorney side, a lot of counsel may specialize in an area, but when you're managing a department or a litigation rep even, you're handling different arenas, right? You may be handling, something that relates to a property litigated claim, or it may be something surrounding ERISA, or just the full gamut. So there's a variety there, and it's a great learning curve. So it never ever becomes boring.
And that's a little, and I guess it depends on who defines it as boring. Because if you ask, I find, I work with a lot of startups, small businesses on their patents and trademarks, and I find what they do very interesting. I get to see a lot of different technology, a lot of different things that people are coming up with. If you ask my wife, she'd think that's boring. Hey, what do you really do all day? You read a lot, you type a lot, you're on your computer a lot, you read a lot, and you do drawings and all those types of things. She's like, that would be boring. She was a nurse before she became a stay-at-home mom, and so for that, she liked to be on her feet and helping patients, and so she would think what I was boring. And yeah, on the other hand, I would never want to be a nurse or the medical field. So it's just always interesting what people find boring versus interesting versus exciting. So with that, then you say, okay, you moved kind of into the litigation side, and it sounds like you kind of got into settlements and you can kind of got to see how a lot of times settlements play out with, even if you don't think there's an issue or you don't think you're liable, you're still going to settle out because for a myriad of reasons, it doesn't make sense to try and go in and prove they're wrong, or to drag it out, or to it gets more expensive. And I think that's where you kind of said that that's where you started to get the idea for maybe what you're doing now with your startup.
Yeah, basically, I noticed some trends and that everyone can relate to, and that would be the growth in field workers, remote workers, gig economy, the expansion of the definition of who is an employee to include contractors and vendors in different jurisdictions, and also looking at the liability of our policyholders at times for actions that they may or may not have had control over. So, and I noticed as well that settlements, and it falls within the category of negligent hiring, supervision, training, within that realm of litigation. And that refers to a business's responsibility for the actions of their workers. In the legal community, it's referred to as agents of the company, so to speak. But with that, I thought, wow, you've got these settlements averaging 1.6 million per incident. And, I saw that exposure growing. And oftentimes, here you have these workers or contractors even that the employer may not have that much control over. And as well, the impact to the society as a whole, with increasing crime. So my thought was, how do we develop a tool that can address, all sides of that coin and those issues of increased crime and fraud and the impact to society, and to have all parties vested in that goal.
Okay, no, and that makes sense. And so with all of that, you kind of started to have that in mind, had that training, get the litigation side. And I think when we talked before, for a period of time, I can't, and you'll have to remind me which way it was. I think that your father passed away, and so you decided to step back from the position you were at, which I think you said was at Lloyd's of London or whatnot, or maybe that was after. But you stepped back, and then you decided, okay, father passed away. You deal with you grieve, which certainly is a difficult time of life. And then you decide, okay, I'm going to re-engage back into the the working community. I'm going to go back and do something. And you kind of had your choice of, now, do I go back to the insurance industry? Do I go back and kind of work for a new employer or different employers, or do I do my own thing? And so with that, then how did you kind of say, okay, I'm done working for other people, or I want to do my own thing, or I've got my own idea, or how did that kind of all play out?
Yeah, exactly. As you've indicated, my father had passed away. I was in a great position with a great company, and I was actually in the process of, I had just gone through training for an executive level there. But when my father passed away, I took a sabbatical to handle his estate, and it required travel out of state, so I needed some flexibility. I had intended on returning back to that position, but I was actually given the opportunity to conduct some audits on behalf of Lloyd's of London, underwriters of Lloyd's, and that allowed me to meet with brokers around the country on my schedule, so that I thought, wow, here's this opportunity to kind of field my thoughts about the solution to these negligent hiring, supervision issues, and get their input directly. And so that opportunity was uniquely advantageous for me to really test if the solution that I had in mind was in fact something that whereby there was an actual problem that existed. I mean, in my mind, from the litigation side, I could see it, but I wanted to see it from a different angle. And so that afforded me the opportunity to also talk to brokers about their thoughts about it.
Okay, so you do that, jump back in the working field, said, okay, I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to do what's I've been vetted. Maybe give the 30-second, this is what I've been vetted is, so people know what it is, and then we can talk into a little bit of how that went. But maybe, so you came up with the idea of I've been vetted, and what would that be?
Yeah. I've Been Vetted is a patent pending worker risk scoring platform. It's a SaaS-based platform, and it uses AI smart tools to conduct worker scoring based on behavioral actions that are found to have occurred before a crime or fraud takes place. And so the second component of that platform is an area that allows the company to conduct also a self-audit of themselves as to their practices and policies, and then they can also receive a score. And so
I'm going to jump. So for the easier to understand version of that, and I'll see if I can summarize. So is it basically almost like Minority Report, to where you're trying to predict who's going to commit the crime or the fraud before they predict it or before they actually commit it? And then based on that, you're going to give alerts or say this one or this may be an issue, or you may want to watch out for this. Is that kind of where you're going with the AI and all of the different things, or did I completely slaughter that?
no, actually, it's not slaughtered. That is a great way to explain what it does. And it's actually based on actual data that we've combed through. We've got 3 data scientists on our team and a criminal psychologist, and we took a multidisciplinary approach that looks at the crime side of it, crime data, insurance, risk, and HR data, as well as the legal side. In looking at those, we were able to discern some patterns and actions and develop some proprietary algorithms from that data.
Okay, so you if I were to summarize it, if you're to basically be able to almost predict with some degree of accuracy, and I don't know what that degree of accuracy is, that hey, this may be an area for fraud, this may be an area for issue, this may be an area that you're weak on or you want to take a look at. Then what do you do with that data? So now I know, because I watched the movie and I related to Minority Report just so I could understand it. There's always even with that one, as great as it was, there was always possibilities of something else going wrong. So if you're predicting something that's going to happen, or predicting that this may be an area of fraud, this may be an issue, this may be an area you're weak on, or those type of things, not foolproof, right? Meaning there is possibility for error. It's hard to predict anything with 100% certainty in life. And so what do they do with that data, or how do they start to use that data to adjust things or to change things?
So it's a SaaS-based platform, and it allows filtering. So as patterns emerge, the supervisors can take a look at that, or the executives of the company, and they can make a decision on expansion, on an area of concern as it relates to a specific occupation, and at the individual level, as regards performance. And there is a redemptive quality to it, because if a worker who also has the ability to see their risk profile, and that risk profile is theirs and it's portable for them, it's permission based, they can take steps through compliance training to improve their score when it goes down. So then that way you've got all parties involved, and we like to say creating transparency and accountability in the human capital supply chain.
Okay, no, I think that makes sense. So with all that, you've got your product, you got your startup, you're going to get started, you're getting going. So how has it been? Has it been all of all uphill, all downhill, been bumps and back and forth, or how is the launch? You take that idea and you say, okay, we're gonna address what we think is an issue in the marketplace or a shortcoming. So then, how has that gone for you?
It has really gone extremely well. We're very excited about the reception. We have had clients in our target industries and outside that are interested. As well, we've garnered the attention of CFBI, which is a think tank out of London, and it's a consortium of about 30 different companies that are large and well known to many. So it has been extremely positive. And I do credit that to the team that we have. We have, executive level, teammates that are veterans within their area.
So I'm not going to let you get away with it quite that easy, because I've been through enough startups and I know that it's not all roses and it's not all easy. So what were some of the difficulties of getting the startup going, or what did you encounter? Because like I said, no matter how good of a startup and how great that hockey stick up is to just take off, there's always those bumps and that. So maybe talk a little bit about what that was in order to really get it going.
True, and I say post launch it's been really well, but prior to that, it was an uphill battle to find the right developers, the right technology, to think about, because I like to think 10 to 20 years out instead of what's going on now. And so staying abreast of that and making certain that we had the right partnerships. I don't know if, one of the things we also learned is, from the standpoint of business planning, you build this business plan and you spend a lot of time on it, and you think you're going to be sticking to the plan, which is kind of how a corporation works. You're more of a long-term play, whereas within the startup community, it's more about being agile and being able to adjust that plan and being able to pivot if need be. So learning to be flexible, that was a big part as well. And having a large degree of patience.
No, I think that's good advice. And I mean, it's always, I think the business plans, if anyone were to ask, I think business plans are well worth it. Meaning, while almost inevitably every startup is going to have to pivot or adjust or figure out where their niche is and what their focus is. And so some people say, well, then what's the point of a business plan? Because you're never going to use it, and half the time you're going to throw it out. I would almost say as much of it is that when you are going through the planning stage, you're almost convincing yourself that this is a good idea, that it can work, that I can make a go of it. And you're also seeing how serious you are, yourself and others, is if you can stick with it. Meaning, if you can't even get a business plan out, highly unlikely you're going to get all the way to the end of the startup and be successful. And so I think that there's still a lot of merit in doing the business plan, with the idea that likely it is the business plan will get thrown out, or you're going to have to pivot or adjust. So,
Exactly.
So with that, so next 6 months to a year, where do you think you guys are going?
Oh, our goal is to become a business-wide best practices. That's our goal, because it provides that extra standard of care, and it also helps, as a competitive advantage for those that utilize the platform, and it helps them to reduce their costs. We have been invited as a use case for Canopy, which is the insurance industry's blockchain initiative, because we do offer the opportunity to either port through encrypted file transfer or via a smart contract. So we plan on continuing to grow our partnerships and to grow through our existing networks, and going on from there. So staying to the plan that you mentioned, adapting and growing.
No, I think those are all like good thoughts, and it sounds like an exciting next step for the business. So, but if I were to now shift as we kind of reach towards the end of the podcast, and I always have kind of the two questions I'll hit at the end of the podcast, so we'll kind of hit on those now. So the first question I always ask is, what was the worst business decision you ever made?
Oh, I would say that was with, would it be the worst? Yeah, I would say. I think that when it comes to teammates, that you have to really look at and make certain that they align with your interests. And that's coming from the first startup that I had. And so I learned that lesson, and I also learned timing is very important, that you, and that's why it's important to interview as many of your target market as possible, so that you can actually gauge that well. So those would be two.
So kind of, if you were to say the worst business decision was not hiring people that their vision or idea for the company or what they saw going was didn't align with where you wanted it to go or where it made sense to go, and then which can be detrimental in the sense that if you have someone that's trying to pull the company a different direction or doesn't have the vision, it can be much more difficult and counterproductive. So, okay,
Sure.
So that was the first question. Second question I always ask is, so you had somebody that's wanting to just get into startups, wanting to get into small businesses, or just jumped in, just got started. What would be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
Documentation of processes right from the start. I think that's so critical and key to have consistency, because as a startup, you're going to conduct, you would hope, a sufficient amount of planning. But as you're doing that, you also need to be documenting your processes, so that hopefully you'll come to a point where you won't have time to do that. So that's something that I think is very important, because it also helps with your business plan. While you're documenting processes that are critical to running the business, it also helps you to think along the lines of the business plan, and the earlier the better.
Okay, no, that's great advice. So, well, cool. Well, I think that both lessons learned from failure as well as great advice, I think those are both key lessons for people to learn on documentation and the importance of it. So if people are wanting to reach out to you, get connected, whether it's learn more about your business, be a customer, make an investment, or otherwise just get engaged, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Directly through Jo Lynn Clemens at I'veBeenVetted.com and or contact at I'veBeenVetted.com.
Perfect. All right. Well, we'll make sure to have people email you email and visit your website. And in the meantime, good luck with things. For all of those of you that are interested in being on the Inventive Journey, love to have you as a guest. If you want to go to inventivejourney.com and apply to be on the podcast, we'd love to have you on and hear about your journey. And for those of you that are interested in patents and trademarks and looking for help with your startup or small business, certainly feel free to reach out to us at Miller IP Law. Well, Jo Lynn, it's been fun to have you on the podcast. You've been a great guest, and appreciate you sharing your journey, and wish you all the best in your upcoming journey, and thanks for coming on.
Thank you.